this is Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian nutritionist with Baby Bloom Nutrition, and welcome to Nap Time Nutrition. Little Daniel, 6 months old and 1 day, did not get the idea that this is nap time nutrition. Say hi, Daniel. Hello. So he'll be joining us. Unfortunately, my wonderful father-in-law flew back to LA, and so I'm on my own with this nap time nutrition. So today we're going to be talking about gluten, and this topic was suggested by a viewer. And the topic for next week, which is dehydration and how to keep your kids hydrated, was also suggested by a viewer. So feel free to make suggestions. I love them. I really want to be on the pulse of what your questions are. I want to be answering your questions. So please answer in the comments what you think future topics could be and what your questions are as far as your nutrition and your family's nutrition. So as I said, Baby Bloom Nutrition. I do private and small group counseling. Nap Time Nutrition every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern. And Toddler Test Kitchen, we are gearing up for a really awesome summer. 2 summer sessions, 4 weeks each, all different recipes. So 8 fresh recipes throughout the summer. And that's at the Hallie Hart Children's Museum. So come check that out. It's Mommy and Me Cooking with geared at 2 to 6-year-olds. And last time we made chocolate tortillas and it was awesome. They were so good. And if you were in that class, please comment. Back me up here. They were awesome. Okay, so what is gluten? Everyone is familiar with gluten-free at this point, but what is gluten? Gluten is a protein. That might rock your world because in American society right now, we think of protein as good. Protein equals good, which is a whole other issue. And I might have addressed that in a different nap time nutrition. But here's the deal. Gluten is actually a combination of 2 different proteins, which is glutenin and gliadin. And when they come together with water, it forms gluten. So technically, the bag of flour in your cabinet is gluten-free because it hasn't hit water. It won't be gluten-free once you do anything with it because chances are you're not going to be eating raw flour. And even if you did, your saliva would then cause those 2 proteins to interweave and make gluten. So that's what gluten is. It's actually a protein. And the purpose of that particular protein is for elasticity. So any product that has some kind of give, when you, like pancakes, when you pull them apart and there's a little bit of stretch inside, that's the gluten. And certain other, if you're working with recipes, there are certain other ways to make that up. My favorite right now is working with chia, which can give the same type of effect. But that's the idea with gluten. If you've noticed on the store, in the stores, you can buy gluten-free products, or you can buy a bag of gluten. Well, why would someone want to buy a bag of gluten? For bread, a lot of people, especially with more chewy breads like challah, are going to add gluten to it in order to increase the elasticity in the bread product. It's a naturally occurring protein in any kind of grain that's related to grass. So what else? Okay, so gluten comes from the Latin term glue. That goes back to the elasticity point that I was talking about. That's why it's named that. And so 1% of people worldwide have celiac disease, and that's not the end of gluten intolerance. I'm going to classify the no gluten people into 3 different categories. There's celiac, which is an autoimmune. There is wheat allergy, which is different, and intolerance, which is different from both of those. And celiac isn't the only autoimmune disease related to gluten intolerance, but it is the most commonly known right now. So 1% of people worldwide have celiac. A lot of those people are undiagnosed. Every year there are more than 200,000 diagnoses in the US. So the chances of you having it are roughly 1%. But if it's in your family, there is an inheritability about it, and your chances go up to 10%. So a lot of times it will run in a family. Also, a lot of times it's not going to be diagnosed until the 20s. Of course, you're going to hear some case about someone who was diagnosed at the age of 4. Yeah, that happens, but more often than not, it's going to present itself later in life. Or possibly it's going to be diagnosed when people can more adequately communicate their symptoms. I mean, a 4-year-old is not going to adequately communicate their symptoms. So it can be difficult to catch. However, if a child is not growing as expected. It might be on the panel of tests that you would run to see what's going on with their growth. You okay? Okay, he's okay. So what are the symptoms of celiac disease? GI symptoms mostly. You have diarrhea, bloating, gas, fatigue, anemia, and also osteoporosis, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I hadn't heard that before. Also, you're going to find infertility, miscarriage, and lactose intolerance. And the miscarriage one is a pretty big one. So what exactly is celiac? Well, the inside of your intestines look like this. They have peaks and valleys, and that's supposed to maximize the surface area so that you can absorb nutrients more effectively. So what happens when you have celiac disease is when you have gluten, it causes inflammation that damages the cells and the intestinal lining, and it starts to look like this. So you still have some amount of absorption, but it has gone down drastically from this to this. You have much less surface area, which is what leads to malabsorption of nutrients. It leads to, sorry, I have a baby in distress. Oh. It leads to malabsorption of certain nutrients. It leads to lack of growth, which is why you might find that in small children. And also other issues. You're going to have vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Aside from celiac, there are other autoimmune diseases that are related to gluten intolerance. Dermatitis herpetiformis, dermatitis herpetiformis. Shane, I hope you're laughing at me. And that's a recurring skin rash. And so a lot of times you can look up images on Google if you're brave and you want to look up rash images on Google. But that is really commonly related to gluten. And when you eliminate gluten from your diet, it eliminates the rash as well. Also, gluten ataxia, which is much less common. And that's where the gluten resistance actually affects your brain. When you have gluten, your body starts to attack your cerebellum, which is going to affect your motor, both fine and gross motor skills. And that can be very bad, as you could imagine, but it's really not that common. Those types of diseases, those types of reactions to gluten that I've spoken about so far are related to type 1 diabetes. And I couldn't exactly explain to you the mechanism, how it's related to type 1 diabetes, but I'm guessing that would be an entirely other naptime nutrition all on its own. So wheat allergy. An allergy is reaction to a protein. And so, as I've mentioned, gluten is a protein, and if you have an actual allergic reaction to it, that's different than celiac, and that's different than an intolerance. You might have a respiratory reaction, or like if you breathe it in, if someone's working with flour and you walk into the room, you could have a reaction. Or it could be that if you eat it, you have a reaction. Also, contact urticaria, and that's when you touch it, you have a reaction on your skin. A lot of people were introduced to urticaria when what was that movie about the juicing? The guy started juicing everything and he had urticaria and it went away. Oh, I just got spit up on. Okay, that was special. Okay, so intolerance. Intolerance is going to be more common, but the jury's still out on exactly what the numbers are. Mainly because gluten's really being demonized right now, and it's responsible for a lot of people's issues, but we're not sure exactly the mechanism. It's difficult to test for an intolerance. So the numbers are all over the board if you look up what they are, as far as how common it is. But you might get a rash, you might get reflux. I know someone who gets reflux if I have gluten. And some people complain of a foggy brain, like foggy mind, everything seems like it's fuzzy. Depression, ADHD-like behavior, abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, headaches, body pain, joint pain specifically, chronic fatigue. This is associated with intestinal damage, like what I mentioned with celiac, where your intestinal villi are here and then they collapse and you get nutritional malabsorption from that. More studies are needed. We really don't know. If you have some kind of ill effect and you eliminate gluten from your diet and you find relief that way, then that's a good indication that you have a gluten intolerance. So what else is going on here? We've seen gluten associated with diets having to do with autism. And the thing with autism, I personally believe there are a lot of subsets of autism. There are different types of autism. Looking at the autistic spectrum as a whole, when you're talking about nutrition, is a huge mistake because each child is different. And should your child benefit from a gluten-free, often casein-free diet, that's great, then that's your child. I don't think that we can really make nutritional statements about autism as a whole. That's all I'll say about that. Gluten is being demonized as far as weight. People are going gluten-free for weight loss. And what I have to say about that is you can't blame bad weight on gluten by itself. If you want to eliminate processed grains in an effort to lose weight, I'll back you up 100%. But gluten itself is likely not the problem of the weight. You want to clean up your diet in general. You want to go with mostly vegetables. You know, as Michael Pollan said in The Omnivore's Dilemma, eat food, not too much. And that's pretty much what it is. No one is going to blame a person's diet contributing to increased weight specifically on gluten. There are a lot of factors. On top of food factors, there's exercise, there are hormones, there's sleep, there's stress. There's a lot going into it. So going on a gluten-free diet and that's the only way you're going to try to lose weight, I really wouldn't suggest that. I wouldn't back that up. So there you have gluten in a nutshell. Nuts, naturally gluten-free. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. I don't have any comments yet. And I look forward to seeing you next week for Nap Time Nutrition, 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be talking about dehydration. You can find me on the web, babybloomnutrition.com, Facebook, Baby Bloom Nutrition, but you're already on my site if you're watching this, and Instagram, babybloomnutr, also Twitter, the same thing, although still figuring that one out. And what else? Come to Toddler Test Kitchen. It's so much fun. Bye.